Hello and welcome to the 74th edition of the AutoTalk Weekly Wrap. I'm Rich Edwards, live from my somewhat shadowy and not yet properly lit here for what has been quite a big week of news for us to cover. But luckily, we have a fairly big panel of people with which to do it. Starting off with the original co-host with the most, live and probably slightly hungover from somewhere in Australia, Graham McDonald.
Yeah, g'day, Cobbers. Sydney International Airport this morning out the window, Richard.
Yes. How are you? How's things over there? You've been over there, I'm guessing, for AIMV.
Yes, that's correct, and it's going pretty well. Without dwelling on it too much, it's one of those sort of slow and steady slogs. If you've ever been involved in a trade association before, anybody, lots of stuff going on in the background, not terribly sexy stuff on the front, but the cogs are moving gently in behind. And, Australia is one of those little quiet success stories. It's just slowly growing and growing and growing and growing, but there's always stuff to do. So, yeah, it's going well.
And a few social beverages after, I hope.
Excellent Lebanese last night at a restaurant in Alexandria. And there may have been a couple of minor beverages of alcoholic nature that followed, as you do.
You got it. It has to be done. It has to be done. Yes. Yes. Right now, I will chuck the next person in the mix, and all the way from the suburbs of Wellington, it's Crawford. How are you?
I'll come right back. You can hear the dogs in the background. Somebody's at my door.
We'll let him deal with that, and we'll bring in from the deep south. Well, I'm not sure Canterbury's the deep south. Amos Banbury, you're back on deck from travelling, and I think having a little bit of the COVID. How you doing now?
Yeah, a little bit ill. I didn't test positive, but I was definitely out. So no, I'm feeling good. Good to go.
Yes. Do you think that you got that from your travels, or you've got kids? Yeah. Kids like me, they bring home everything.
Yeah, no, I did a one-day trip in and out of Aussie, and maybe it was to do with the travel, I don't know, but yeah, hard work. But anyway, good to go now.
I was stuck on a very full flight out of Dunedin yesterday morning? No, yesterday morning? No, day before yesterday, sorry. After getting stuck in Queenstown due to weather, and there was a woman next to me on the flight who, there is no way she should have been flying. People, if you're sick, stay the F at home. For the love of God. Why do that to yourself or other people? I mean, really. It just...
You spent the whole flight going...
Yeah.
Well, no. So I didn't, because I have a child at daycare. So I've had everything under the sun this year. I think my immune system is now like, and knock on wood, like gold standard. But yeah, we'll see. Now back from rescuing his dog from no doubt a serial killer at the door, because that's what all dogs think. David Crawford.
Yeah, sorry about that. The concrete truck is here, and they're pouring concrete into lots of holes for piles and posts and things, including a fence that I'm building between my house and the neighbour's house. So yeah, it's a little bit going on, but hopefully I won't get interrupted again.
Tall fences make good neighbours.
Keeping the dogs in one section makes for even better neighbours.
We've as I mentioned before, just moved, and we met one of our neighbours last night, and it seemed a bit weird because we're in a fairly nice strip of property with some generally retired people around us. And last night at about 9 o'clock, we started hearing the wonderful song of a Toyota V8 at full revs, and started smelling the smell of smoke wafting through our house. And more of it came, and more of it came. And I decided to wander down the driveway and see what was going on. And our young tradie neighbours, like a couple of properties over, decided that their driveway was the perfect place to let loose in their lowered Toyota Celsius. And I come wandering up, and I think they're thinking, oh, God, here's this old dude from next door going to tell us off. And I said, guys, next time you do a burnout, invite me. Just when you do them, make sure it's on a night when there's some wind to take the smoke away, not to choke out the neighbours.
I'm sure that you're all that advice on board, Richard. I really am. Good for you.
Hey, I am supportive of the odd burnout, but there's just got to be. You got to think about these things. It's like look, we're all middle-aged men. We know barbecues. We know which way our barbecue is going to blow on a certain day, right? You got to time it and plan it right. Treat your burnout the same. Think about where your burnout smoke is going to go. That's all I ask. Burnout,
Lessons we wish we'd learned, right?
Well, I think as barbecuing middle-aged men, we hark back to that experience of burnout smoke to decide which direction on which side of the house the barbecue should be. We got to, it's all the same. It's all the same.
What have we become, guys?
At least you're still supporting that. It's good energy.
Yeah.
They can do burnouts wherever they like as long as it's not in my front yard.
Well, pretty much, exactly. Hey, I love a good burnout. Graham, we've seen a few burnouts in our time.
We've seen a few good burnouts in our time, Richard.
We've done a few burnouts in our time.
I've destroyed a couple of old motorbike tyres before I've had them replaced.
We're going to the cold Kiwi.
You rebel, you!
Watching a guy with one leg to win the burnout competition on some old Honda that he adapted so he could keep on riding, and it was quite an impressive sight to see. Anyway, right. It's been a big week for news, and a few things going around to discuss. One that I don't have on the chart here, but I'm working on a separate thing for that we'll put together. Is it seems to me it was the first week, and David, you might have some insight on this, and raised charges for entering vehicles into the system after compliance, both for new and used. And I know there were a few people who had invoices that made them gasp a little. But it's not like this wasn't a new thing. It's been, it was kind of done and dusted a while ago. Is that fair?
Yeah. The background to this is the members been really busy in not reading emails and not understanding what has been communicated to them. So back in April last year, NCTA consulted on fees. Now, the big change is entry certification. So the charge per vehicle for entry certification is raised from something like $1.60 to, they proposed $29. In the end, it's $36 for new vehicles anyway. And so that's a cost that has to be passed on to the vehicle owner as part of the on-road costs, etc. And the NZTA then announced the outcome about 6 months ago. That was about the time I had one foot out the door. So between Mark and myself at the time, we did communicate by email that this stuff was happening. But given everything else that was happening around the Clean Car Discount, the Clean Car Standard, and consultation with the agency around how all of that was working, it was something that I think was lost in the noise of everything else that's going on, and it's just caught a few out.
It's a weird one because I'm generally pretty on top of things, and even I wasn't aware it was coming, and it just feels like it was one thing that just didn't seem to get out there that much, despite it being on paper for some a fairly big change, though when you actually look at it and the fact that it can be passed on and so forth. And I think it's been like 10 years since they reviewed it, and it just wasn't paying its way.
It was one of about, 10 or 12 fees and charges that was changed. And a lot of them, some went down, some went up by a little bit. So a lot of the changes were inconsequential. They were just tinkering around the edges and what you would expect. But this one wasn't inconsequential. And in the MIA submission, Mark noted that it was a big increase. The MIA didn't support that level of increase, and that if they went ahead with it, then that was a fee that would have to be passed on to the purchasing consumer. And that was at $29, and then it died for a year, and then a year later they come out and said, oh yeah, we've done it, and by the way, it's now $36. So a couple of distributors were unaware of this, in spite of messages saying that it was coming. And I guess, I could have probably done a better job in pointing it out, but it just got lost in the noise. And so they've had these 2 months of significant costs passed on to them that they haven't charged back to the customer. So it's a cost that the distributors will have to wear until they adjust their systems.
Graham, have you chucked another 30 odd bucks on your on-road costs there?
We're going to have to. Hey, look, it actually was Signal. I do recall the emails coming out talking about it. But I think, like everyone, there's so many changes around the regulatory landscape and what we were debating at the time about, particularly everything from clean car discount and standard through to changes in the used car ratings, safety ratings.
Why worry about fighting $30 when you're fighting $3,000?
Well, if you're in the used sector, for example, for us, how can you fight it? It is what it is. So I guess everyone's on-road costs and fees, if you charge them, because not everyone in the used vehicle sector charges it up front. They absorb it into the margin of the car and increase the value of the vehicle. It's going to be absorbed somewhere, and ultimately the consumer will pay that. It's just a question of where you hide it.
Yeah, the interesting thing about it was I initially was like, how the heck can they justify that for entering? Because I, just thought it was entering just details of the car into the system. And I'm not here to defend the NZTA or anyone on this, but sorry, Wakatahi, but it'll be back to NZTA very soon, I think, if I suspect right from what's happening.
It'll be both.
Yeah, seems like a bit of a waste of money to change it now, but it seems that efficient regulating seems to be only an issue for them when it suits. It hadn't been done in a long time, and I ran the back of a crisp packet numbers, and the system would have only been collecting like under $400,000 a year to run the system, and the fact it's got staff and all this kind of stuff on top of it. And even when you go to the new figures, it's still not necessarily collecting a massive amount for what is a fairly sizable regulatory function.
So the whole principle behind the fees and charges is a sharing of costs between the Crown and the person or company that gains a benefit, and so there has to be a trade-off to determine how much of it is a direct benefit, and therefore that should be fully cost recovered, and how much of it is a shared cost between the Crown and the private benefit. So that's what the fees and charges review was all about. But they also have been massively underfunded, and it was something that had to change, and Treasury insisted that they do the review. And it was a huge discussion document at the time. But of course, it was something that we look at it and say, oh, that change is small, that change is small. Yeah, that one's a worry. That's small, that's small. And you were right, Richard. We were worried, the new vehicle industry at the time, and I personally, been in the hot seat at the time, was worried about the millions of dollars that distributors could potentially face if the clean car discount and clean car standard was all skew with. So it just got lost in the noise.
Mm-hmm. Hey, Moss, expect all your finance contracts to go up by like $36 now.
Yeah. It's always it's just like, I think, like Graham and David are saying, it's always something that someone's going to look at, and I think it's especially with the document side, cost recovery, paying employees that are covering those certain areas. So sort of probably something that's looked at on the finance side as well by the companies.
Yeah, you guys are quite heavily monitored to make sure any costs you do in that space are justifiable, aren't you?
100% justifiable. That's the key word. Yeah.
The problem we face is it's just another charge on top of it. It's been a year of incremental charge increases across the board. And I know no one wants to listen to a woe is me car dealer or car industry people talking about how our costs are increasing. But the reality is 2023 has been almost unparalleled in terms of the rapid escalation of costs that the sector faces, and not all of which you can pass on. It's at the same time as the market is flat, and it's difficult to raise your retail prices to the public to justify the cost increases you're seeing at the ground. And it's been just, I'd say, a year of margin compression, for want of a better way of putting it. Margin compression, not so much through the prices coming down, but through the escalation of costs across every aspect of particularly the regulatory environment that we deal with, that we have to absorb.
Talking about passing on, Graham, I had a dealer call me this morning wanting to talk about the clean car discount, and they were questioning when the discount comes off, what they need to do with their pricing. And they were basically saying that, do I need to take the amount of the rebate off my hybrids to make the kind of net price at the end for the customer the same? And I said, well, if you do that, aren't you kind of suggesting you're profiteering on the rebate in the first place? Or, it's kind of their rebate, not yours.
no offense to the person that made the call, but it's a no-brainer, surely. The rebate was never the property of the dealer. The idea
I think
behind it
some
always
dealers
was
saw it that way, though.
Yeah, no, you're right, Graham. It absolutely was the impact on the purchaser, whether they were able to claim a rebate back from the government, not the dealer, or have to pay a fee through before registration could be finalised. It had nothing to do with a new or used dealer or distributor. This was purely either money back from the government or money to the government by the person purchasing the vehicle. So the vehicle price is the same the day before and the day after.
Here's an interesting one on that, David, from the new car side, is that we've seen a lot lately, particularly with EV distributors with EVs trying to move a lot of stock, I think, before the end of the rebate. A lot of special pricing advertised with the rebate included, and they're clarifying it in the small print. But yeah, very much at a small print level. It's I think it's a slightly dangerous game they're playing by doing that, aren't they?
It's a subject that during my time there was raised every now and then about the need for the marketing end to be very careful. Otherwise, the Consumer Watchdog, the Commerce Commission, would become interested through misleading practices. And they just need to be really careful, is my advice on how they manage it. It's got to be clear. Consumer has to understand it, and it's got to be easily seen, not hidden in the small print.
Yeah, delicate. Anyway, let's actually move on to some news for the week, and we're going to start, and we'll see how this works with so many people in the system when I pop this up. Oh, there you go. Works perfectly. This happened pretty much within an hour or two of our last live stream. Everyone knows about it now. New government formed. Simeon Brown confirmed as Transport Minister. A new government has finally been announced following weeks of coalition negotiations. We'll see ACT leader David Seymour and New Zealand First Leader Winston Peters share the role of Deputy Prime Minister for the first time in New Zealand's political history. When have the Deputy Prime Ministers ever been in any way important? Can we just reinforce this point? No one cares about you, Deputy Prime Ministers. Meanwhile, senior national members...
Unless our Prime Minister jogs on overseas and is away for an extended trip or has the temerity to be incapacitated, then they kind of do matter a wee bit.
Only briefly.
Status. It's all status.
Don't forget that if Luxon died tomorrow, National would appoint a new leader and they would become the Prime Minister, not the... Yeah, anyway. Brown says he's honoured to have been asked to take on the roles. He's also got energy and local government. There are big challenges facing New Zealand in all these areas, and I'm looking forward to working hard to deliver for New Zealanders in these portfolios. Whole pile of people there, blah, 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 blah. So Simeon is our man. It was long expected he would be. I think he has a fairly solid relationship with the industry, and he has shown a willingness there. Well, he's outright indicated the industry he wants them to kind of take the lead on a lot of the work program that he's going to have in front of us. I think that could be a real positive. If we move on from that, the government has confirmed, I think is a strong word. They have indicated in Tuesday's post-cabinet press conference that they have a few pieces of legislation they are wanting to push through Parliament under urgency before the end of the year. I think they've really got all of about 2 sitting weeks to use, and they've got to get through some ceremonial stuff in that time as well, and they've got to repeal Three Waters, and they've got to repeal multiple RMA legislations. But they've indicated that the clean car discount repeal is part of that work program. I suspect it's like number 3 or 4 of 4. So I wouldn't guarantee it. David, you know how slow or how fast Parliament can work. What do you think the chances are they'll make it?
Well, they can wipe the rebate by a stroke of pen in 10 minutes, because that's just a budget decision. It's a vote budget. It's the fees. The fees,
and they wouldn't do one or the other. I would have thought, because then it's saying got utes paying into effectively nothing.
Correct, and it was the ute tax that they really campaigned on. So it's the doing away with the regulation. That doing away with the regulation is easier than getting a regulation in place, because you have to consult on the regulation in place. If you're merely wiping regulations, I don't think you have to consult on that, so that should be a much easier task.
It'll still need 3 readings, I guess, or without the
No,
consultation, does that drop?
no, it's not. It's not the same as primary legislation going through Parliament. It is a
Yeah.
regulatory process through a regulation-making powers. So it's
Okay,
something
cool.
that it just needs a cabinet agreement and then regulations amended and then a gazettal notice.
Yeah, yeah.
It'll get
So-
rolled up into some sort of omnibus piece of
Well,
work.
it'll be an amendment to the Land Transport Act, won't it?
Mm.
Yeah. So, okay, well, interesting to see. So, high chance that will go before the end of the year now. That's looking more and more likely. I wouldn't rule it out making it to the end of January, but yeah.
I don't think they have to amend the Land Transport Act. The Land Transport Act enables regulations to be made, and if regulations are made, it stipulates what can and can't be in those regulations.
Okay.
So if you've made regulations, then you want to undo those regulations. That is envisaged under the power-making bits of the Act. So I would be surprised if, for the clean car discount, they had to amend it. They have to amend the Act, though, if they want to make changes to the clean car standard and particularly targets before in the 26, 27 year. They are hardwired into the Act.
Yep. I think the CCD was the main fish they want to fry for now, but no doubt they will get to that later. So if I think you can start banging on that. I have heard that since our story went out the other day, I think we're one of the first to kind of pull that detail out and get it out to market. I've heard from some of my friends in the electrified side of the industry that things have started to boogie real fast. And one of them was saying, I think in the afternoon after that was announced, they had signed off on more than 300 fleet sales in that afternoon, literally in the matter of hours, and more to come. In fact, I think they're pushing some other promotions aside just to give dealers the capacity to process what they believe will be coming out over the next few weeks, because free $7,000 is pretty popular.
I've been across on the used sector, Richard. It's been pretty hard to market to public as part of your marketing material that the clean car scheme was going to end when you couldn't actually guarantee it was going to end. But now they've confirmed a finite date. Now you can speculate whether you think that's going to happen or not, but that they've confirmed an intent to end the scheme on the 31st of December. Now you can use it in your marketing. You can actually push it out to your audience that the CCD is finished. Get your rebate now. You've got the best part of 30 odd days to do it. You can utilize that, I think, fairly effectively. So I'd see an uptick in the sale of hybrids and bits and pieces going forward too. And the last thing to comment on about that is the scheme is broke. Of course it's going to end on the 31st of December. The scheme is broke.
The scheme is not broke.
What's the shortfall?
So last I checked, the shortfall was about 100, but the scheme had actually started to turn the corner where it was actually starting to pay back in. Between the last two reports, essentially the fee payers paid in more than the EVs bought out. So it had actually started to turn a corner. So wasn't broke, and it was going to, if you look at the way it was dropping, even if it hadn't gotten any better, you were still looking at another 4 or 5 months there, I think, to my numbers. David might have a different opinion, but it was...
No, I understand that the overdraft banked by the Crown was reducing. But it was always going to be a difficult one. And oddly, the new vehicle sector didn't have any qualms about marketing the end of the clean car discount before it was confirmed. They were into this as soon as the National looked like they were going to lead a coalition government. And I think that's shown too. November sales for new vehicles, at least from the dashboard, indicate about 14,500 for the month of November, which is about 1,000 less than this time last year. That's a bit stronger than I anticipated. And
it was actually ended up being 2.8% up passenger cars.
Oh, passenger cars, yeah. I was just looking at
passenger cars
the
up
total market,
2.8%, and new cars and new commercials down 32 or something like that.
Yeah. So
we'll get to that in the next one.
But yeah, so that indicates the people are getting in and trying to buy rebatable vehicles before the end of December.
Yeah, when you've got the likes of Volkswagen giving you $6,000 for a toaster on a brand new model, that's pretty hefty. And I think what we've now at the point where after rebate you can have a brand new EV for $35,000. In the case of the GWM Aura. So, yeah, there's certainly some discounts going out the door. Now, some of that is because of this, some of it's because I think people miscalled the market. But yeah, there's some deals to be had. Do you think you'll see a rush of EV finance coming through, Amos?
It's been a discussion point this end. I think it's, the market tends to lead itself to, from a penetration wise, it's more on, generally used and use. So, yeah, roll on January.
Yeah. Right, let's look at those statistics. Another positive passenger month as commercials suffer. So we were 2.8% up year on year with 11,491 units in the passenger space. Anyone who had hybrids or electric were doing pretty darn well. In commercials, registrations were down 32% to 3,022 units. Had someone from Ford comment to me this week that they think about 30% of their market is basically waiting for the new regime to get their way, essentially. If we look at passenger cars, Twitter led with Mitsubishi in second and MG in third, and that was off the back of a lot of electric hatchbacks, 468 MG4s. If we look at the models, Twitter RAV4, predominantly, I think it's virtually all hybrid now, 1,419 units. Mitsubishi Outlander 557, then the Tesla Model Y on 544, Toyota Corolla on 486, and MG4 on 468. And commercials, Ford led, and Ranger was the top model with 1,086 units. And I ran a little number on that. If you take a rough average of the CCD, the Ranger alone, the fund would have collected around $4.5 million just on Ranger registrations last month. So that's sizable, and but it shows that people are still willing to go and spend on utes and take their ute delivery because, yeah, that's a lot of funding going into the pot. If we go across onto the used side, registrations up 34.7% for the month. So really good month for imports, apparently. The 9,641 cars. So while it's up on last year, it's not exactly a historic high at all. Twitter led with the Aqua, Nissan and Mazda. So a fairly busy month for imports. But Graham, would you guys consider that a busy month, or is that just like last year was a bit bad?
I'd go for that, actually. Yeah, last year wasn't fantastic this time of the year. So, no, that's not a number to run home and buy your Christmas presents on. It's okay. It's okay. Like I've maintained all the way through. This has been the second part of this year. It hasn't been exciting. There haven't been record numbers cracked in the used vehicle sector. It's just been steady. And it's probably been steady minus rather than steady plus, if I was to use an industry averaging term.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, it's an interesting time. Now, a really interesting story that we really don't know a huge amount yet, but I think it's going to have some repercussions perhaps as to how things work out in the next year or two. Optimus acquires controlling stake in AutoTrader. The Optimus Group co-has entered into an agreement to acquire a controlling stake in AutoTrader Media Group. They named the company cheekily close to Auto Media Group. The owners of the autotrader.co.nz platform. The investment extends the range of services Optimus provides to the automotive sector, and it gives a stake in a digital platform. AutoTrader Media Group, current owners Ross Logan, Rich East, acquired the title from Bauer Media in 2019 under a management buyout. At the time, the site listed around 23,000 vehicles per month and had a limited online presence. Today, they've rebuilt the website. They're pretty much predominantly online, and they have 44,000 cars listed. Of course, Optimus, better known to people prominently in New Zealand for the Nichibo brand. They have their Auto Finance Direct operation, Vins, Jevic. They are expanding heavily into Australia. They just bought a rather large group of dealers in Australia. So, yeah, anyone got any thoughts as to why they might want this wee tool in New Zealand?
Well, I think the key to it is, as has been pointed out to me, is data. And so these days, and Amos, I'm sure you're going to nod your head in agreement here, that everything about transactions now is data, is about the accumulation and retention of data. and having a better CRM than your competitor, or how you manage it. And so the AutoTrader platform, I guess, is going to be providing exactly that for the dealers that choose to use it. Whether there'll be any incentivization for Nichibo customers, that remains to be seen. I'm guessing clearly there's going to be something along those lines. But yes, it's a race for data acquisition and management, and this is just a more front public-facing tool.
Should we be worried when we've got one major player in the trade kind of capturing one of the significant channels? And I know that, look, sorry guys, but AutoTrader is not a patch on TradeMe when it comes to market share. But should we be worried that they are capturing one of what is like second or probably third channel in the market? Any thoughts on that, Amos?
Yeah, that was discussed, Arian. I think, you know, if the other side is as well, if AutoTrader is good and it gets some eyes out there, I think the other one is it's obviously going to be a lot more regulated and have a lot more positives than compared to the Facebook marketplace that we touched on a couple of months ago. So, yeah, I think they would probably do good things based on everything else they do. So maybe that's a positive. And the discussion points around TradeMe and the costs at the moment are so relevant. So dealers obviously want another outlet.
I think the other key there is there's been a lot of talk, and look, to be quite blunt, there's a few players in the market walking around at the moment, talking some pretty big things about what they could do in regards to competing with TradeMe. But anyone who wants to take on TradeMe needs a heck of a lot of money. It's all about the money. It's all about being able to get that volume, that just presence in the market. And if one company has enough money to do that, it's Optimus. To be blunt, you need 100%. Money.
Yeah.
So will be interesting to see. Graham, are you guys on AutoTrade at the moment?
Actually, we are. Yes, we're across most of the platforms except for, funny enough, Facebook Marketplace. But, you know, I think you hit the nail on the head there, Richard. The TradeMe brand is so big, and it's not just about the money either. There's been a very long time spent cultivating, if you like, in people's minds that TradeMe is the go-to to go and purchase a vehicle. It's like the Google brand, for example, or for that matter, another company we talk about a lot in here is Turners, have done very well to cultivate that as being the sort of the byword for purchasing a used, later model Kiwi new vehicle. That's just become their thing. And so TradeMe have spent quite a long time now working on that particular brand, whether it's, selling, dustbins and sorts of bits and pieces through to motor vehicles. But it's the go-to default platform for Kiwis to look at all sorts of things and not just cars. And I think one of the parts of AutoTrader that it hasn't managed to capture is it hasn't become the go-to for people to look at for everything. And while they're there as part of their browser to look at motor vehicles, it's really hard to knock off an organization or a platform that is that large and covers that many different aspects of people's daily life by moving into the used car space with more listings.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Right. Now, David's just to pop out for a few minutes, but we'll carry on. And that is, sorry, slight technical thing there for a second. New government needs to tackle automotive issues head on. This is the opinion from the MTA. Now, the MTA puts out these kind of things on a regular basis. I do find the MTA team to be a little bit, quite rightly, self-serving, I think, around some of their opinions, but they like to frame it as being for the good of all. But they've come up with a few things. Vocational training, inflation, the war on a fitness regime, crime, and lack of skilled staff are some of the issues the incoming government needs to tackle head-on, according to the Motor Trade Association. MTA Chief Executive Lee Marshall says the cost of living and inflation are hurting a lot of automotive businesses and their people. Many of our members are also struggling to find enough skilled staff to fill their vacancies, so immigration settings and the efficiency of the system need urgent review, Marshall says. Graham's a big issue for many of our members. Yeah. But my funny thing is, I never think when you put out a press release about this kind of stuff, we'll just cut to the chase on this, you should always put, at least if you're a PR guy, you're a government or a government relations guy, for the love of God, put the vocational stuff, the training, above the immigration stuff. At least make it look like you want to train more people before you want to import more people. because that's the reality. That's all these organizations, and I'm sorry, trade is guilty of it. The default seems to import before train, and it should be the other way around, or should be sit hand in hand. So yeah, they've covered off a whole pile of really important stuff there. Still, I think the MTA has built a good relationship with the Transport Minister Simeon Brown in opposition, and they say they're looking forward to working with him. Both of us are in the people business, making sure all New Zealanders can travel safely around the country for work or pleasure, not to mention the freight our country relies upon. Yeah. Look, they mean well.
Yes, nothing like a good press release.
They're pleased with the government's policy of installing 10,000 cars, shifting towards electronic road user charging, and the repeal of the clean car discount. So, yeah, I'm not entirely sure why the MTA would have that big of a view on the clean car discount. They say the plan to phase out the clean car discount is one area where the MTA can offer advice around the other opportunities that can be explored to reduce the carbon output of the fleet. And I'll tell you where they're going with that. The MTA is desperate, and they have been for a long time, to get in-service vehicle emissions testing.
Yes, they have.
Who can tell me why? Who can tell me? Do you think it's for the love of the environment?
Bueller?
They want to fix your car when it fails the test.
But to a friendly workshop you go. Hey, look, why not as well? At the end of the day, that's the business they're in, right? Why not?
Yeah. The one thing that all the politicians agreed upon at the MTA run political debate held late last year was that in-service emissions testing ain't happening. It ain't happening. I just think they see it as a cost or issue too far for them, and I suspect that we're just better off moving the cars through the market a little bit better. So yes, we were just breaking down the MTA's calls on the new government, David.
The in-car service testing has always been problematic because you can only test to the standard that the car is built to. So really, any testing ought to be just for faults, not for any other standard faults against the standard to which they're built. And it's just expensive in most countries. You know, the cost-benefit ratio is not there. It's done for political reasons more than anything else.
Yeah, exactly. Now, MTF Finance delivers an $11.6 million full-year profit. MTM's Finance is reporting a net profit after tax of $11.6 million for the 12 months to September 30, up 38% on the previous year. The vehicle loan specialist saw lending assets increase by 32% to just over $1 billion. Underlying profit after tax increased by 71% to $11.3 million, with total lender earnings up 27%, $85.5 million. So that is that's $85.5 million, largely out into dealers' hands, if I've got their structure roughly right. I know they've got franchise owners as well, but I think a lot of them are dealers anyway. The company says the result reflects a continued focus on community lending and expanding its vehicle dealer network and digital offering. It also supported a record growth year, with lending up 40% year on year to $846 million, up from $607 million in September 2022. I'm saying words very fast there that I don't really understand. The purchase of the Lending People in February 2023 gave customers access to a new online digital lending channel, while franchise branches continued to provide dedicated financial advice and solutions at a local level. Insurance partnerships with AMI and Tower. A few things going on there. Where are we? No, that's about all we really need to talk about from that. How is the finance market at the moment, Amos? Let's talk generally. I mean, we saw a bit of a rush back to vehicle finance when mortgage rates started to go up. Is that continuing?
There's just a sort of real plateau at the moment where it's just a continuation of the same thing. I definitely feel like maybe Graham sort of touched on that from the sales side. It definitely seems to be the same sort of from about June through to now. Very consistent. Obviously, everything you'd want a bit of growth and continue on, but that's definitely the feedback from obviously your main lenders, banks, that same sort of thing as well. It's just a continuation. So,
Mm-hmm. And I kind of think with the what they're talking about with that lending people thing is, do dealers, you think, sometimes need to focus a bit more on not just the finance that they're taking just straight through the yard when someone's already hooked onto a car? I mean, do they perhaps need to be looking at pushing their offering out as part of their website, and the car is almost a second consequence of that?
Yeah, it's totally. And I think when you have a captive customer, they have a great experience and you do a good job, you've got the ability to have those other discussions, and it could be on the day, but also down the track as well. It's such a good point. Like if you do have a good offering, there's such an extension you can go out. You know, one person doesn't buy one car. Typically that changes. You know, a family buys more, they buy a boat, a jet ski, a caravan, deconsolidation. So if you have the ability to extend your offering, it's gold. Yeah.
Is there an element of that people don't like being turned down to their face? So if they get that underway online before they're in the yard, they can like avoid embarrassment almost to an extent.
Yeah, totally. Yeah. And that's where having a good offering on your website or that sort of thing is so valuable. It's that precursor to, it could be a contact form where it's just an application. And I know a lot of dealerships do that and do that well when there's that offering piece when they haven't actually laid eyes on their customer yet. It's an absolute another sales tool that should be used. Yeah.
Awesome. Right, on to the next one. And it kind of circles back around to where we're going. And I think you need to go in a minute, Graham. So you just shout out when you have to.
Yep.
Drive Electric urges Minister to not crash EV sales. EV advocacy group Drive Electric is asking New Transport and Energy Minister Simeon Brown to consider alternative approaches to incentivising EV sales. Incoming Drive Electric Board Chair Kristen Corson has written an open letter to the Brown to say the new government intends to the new government intends ending the clean car discount by December 31, but there are different ways to incentivise EV uptake. If we take away incentives now, with the fleet only just nudging 2%, we are going to seriously harm uptake and confuse the market, Corson says. Drive Electric realises the government wants to electrify New Zealand and install 10,000 public charging stations. This is fantastic ambition, which we completely support. Public charging is critical for enabling a functioning electric transport system, but you also need cars new and second hand. You can read more about that over at EVs and Beyond. Now, I have a sneaky gut feeling that we will see some form of incentive come back, but I think it'll be a spin-off of the carbon tax system. Luxon's talked before about returning a lot of the carbon dividend as such through to the public, and I wonder if a smaller, just literally off-the-shelf funded from that rebate might be in order at some point. Any thoughts if that might be a possibility, David? I'll unmute you there. There you go. Oh, there you go.
I haven't heard rumours that there would be something to replace the rebate once it's gone, and I don't think ACT would be keen for it. It's one of the coalition partners. But the Drive Electric's open letter makes a lot of sense, and it echoes similar thoughts that I gave to Simeon last year when he first said it's our policy to take away the rebate. And I said, well, if you do that, at least from the new vehicle sector, the new vehicle distributors either want it phased out or given a good lead time, because it just cuts right across customers' expectations and the challenge that the new vehicle sector has around 6 to 9 months lead time for purchasing vehicles and getting them in country. So any rapid changes can be quite difficult to absorb. So who knows? The only thing that I do know is that January and February are going to show really distorted sales figures again, as we saw in previous big pre and post month sales. So until they get it out and it settles down, we're just going to see a disrupted market, and the new vehicle distributors, parent companies, find New Zealand a pretty frustrating place to operate in the moment with things changing. They don't understand the politics here very well.
Market fuckery. Anyway,
I'd argue from a different angle and say that, from my personal opinion here, is that the EV market is now mature enough in New Zealand that it can operate on its own 2 feet. I think At some point in time, you've got to take the training wheels off. And look, Drive Electric's business is to promote the sale of electric vehicles, so the press release is no surprise. But I think the market out there is already making its mind up whether it wishes to purchase an electric vehicle or not. And I think the incentivization of it at the early stages was good, because there really wasn't any sort of particular penetration of EVs into our market yet. And it encouraged, yes, David, and I know you talk about this a lot of different times, it did encourage the uptake into the market of brands and models that we may not have otherwise seen, or it brought forward their implementation and introduction, is probably the better way of putting it. But here we are, a number of years on, and then at some point in time, you have to let the market find its own way and its own feet, and the public to make their own mind up without that broader assistance. And to me, the time is possibly now, where there is already a really good range of vehicles to choose from. There's some really good new models coming. There's some new distributors coming, some new brands with EV product. And it's a good time, I think, for the market to figure out what it wants to be to the public and what the public want from it. At some point in time, you've got to pull off the tit.
I agree. I agree, Graham, but my modelling shows that it's probably 1 year too soon, at least for the new vehicle sector. It's a different dynamic for the used, and I don't profess to understand the used dynamics as well as I do for the new. But at least for the new vehicle market, the crossover point is where the targets for the Clean Car Standard start to bite and cause incentivisation. We're not there yet. So my preference, this is my personal view based on modelling, would be for the clean car discount to have been phased out in 2024, at least by the end of 2024. 2025 was the year that I would have seen zero rebates. So the government did have an opportunity to sort of say, yeah, we're going to do it, and we're going to give you 12 months notice and cut them back for 2024 and then phase them out by end of December 24. So it's just, yeah, you're right. It is always was going to be a transitionary, kick the market into action type thing. And the other one, and Simeon Brown does understand this, and he understands it really well, much better than the Labour government did. And that is that this is a marathon to decarbonise the transport fleet. It's not a sprint race. And so Simeon Brown wants to adjust things so that we get things irreversibly going down the right track, as opposed to jump-starting us and forcing a lot of cost into the sector. And that's what's also driving up prices of new and used vehicles. It's not just the regulatory environment. Well, this is as a consequence of the regulation. You go too fast, prices just get out of control.
I think the interesting thing to me is that I don't think the path from here is necessarily about subsidizing or assisting EVs, in that and a government of personal responsibility and all that, and you know, user pay should understand this, is that there should be a cost to choosing options that are detrimental to the public and have trackable costs. If we take, for example, utes, there are proven statistics out there of the cost that weighs on the health system from light diesel particulate in the air in cities. And perhaps we need to start costing some of these costs of emissions into the system somehow. And so potentially, could we, once they get into this, you know, road user charge for everyone, that maybe vehicles that emit more charge slightly more on the system? Not necessarily the same extent as we've seen with the Clean Car discount, but it's acknowledged in that way. Now, it is already partially acknowledged in the Clean Car Standard, but again, that's not a system that necessarily shapes the buying decisions of the public, which is what we potentially need to be looking at, as well as how the trade chooses their vehicle. I am all for anyone, and this, you know, this goes back to Act National. They're all parties of personal responsibility. I am all for everyone being able to choose to drive whatever they want. But if their car, if it's idling in traffic in the middle of the city and it's statistically causing an impact on the health of people, and that is costing money in the health system, that should be priced into the system somewhere. And I'm sure people come up with justification. People come up with justifications for the same thing around certain aspects of electric vehicles. Fine, but
it is priced to a certain extent, Richard, in that new vehicle exhaust emission standards aren't cheap for the manufacturer to do. And that price is passed on to the consumer, which is why new vehicles will go up in price when 6D becomes relevant. But you are right. If everybody was on a road user charge system, an ERUC system, there are 15, 16, 17 different things you can charge for to incentivize behavior. And one of them is the relative environmental performance of the vehicle that you choose to drive. But I always get nervous about governments doing that for the ability for them to overly distort, particularly if you get some enthusiastic left-leaning, green-oriented governments who might exaggerate the costs. Oh dear, I said it.
What you mean there, David? With that, gentlemen, I must leave you. I'm going to go and pack my bags and catch a plane. So
are you off to go and emit some CO2 at 40,000 feet?
Lots of CO2, lots of it. I'll have some flight with some politicians. I'll see everyone next Friday.
We'll enjoy some eggs and Kranskis in the lounge.
Don't you wish? Cheers, all.
Get you. Right, let's run through these last few as well, because everyone's got busy days, I'm sure. The OCR remains on hold at 5.5%. The Reserve Bank has kept the official cash rate OCR on hold at 5.5%, but warns inflation is still too high and could lead to future hikes. Remaining unchanged at 5.5% was expected by many economists and analysts, and it has remained at that level since May. However, in a surprise to the market, the forecasted peak OCR was raised from 5.59% to 5.69%. The Reserve Bank's OCR forecast does not see rates falling until mid-2025. Now, interestingly, of course, the OCR is a big lever on mortgage rates, and we are seeing some pain at the moment. I think 19,000 mortgage payments are late at the moment. Are you guys seeing defaults up, Amos, in the finance trade? And how much does the OCR actually affect the finance rates that people are paying?
So we haven't seen a spike for our facilities on our book that we write on our end. However, the comment about the OCR, obviously the last one before that one was obviously there was no change. There was a couple of big accounts put their buy rates up, like big facilities in New Zealand that we all use. And that was because of, supposedly a whole lot of pressure coming from different areas. So I think obviously the arrears thing is one that everyone needs to watch really closely. And obviously everyone does, because that is absolute performance on the book. And the only way to turn that is that dial is those buy rates that affect all of us, from across the board. So, yeah.
We'll see when the next time that goes up. Now, people moving around. Inchcape appoints new SsangYong and LDV national sales managers following the acquisition of the distributorship for LDV and SsangYong. Inchcape New Zealand has appointed national sales managers for both brands. Penny Thorne has been appointed SsangYong New Zealand national sales manager, and Jeff Phillips has been appointed LDV New Zealand national sales manager. Thorne assumes responsibility for overseeing the strategic management of the SsangYong New Zealand sales and operations team and supporting the peak performance of the national dealer network. She has an extensive automotive experience spanning commercial vehicles operations and brand management, plus sales and marketing roles. Phillips is doing the same for the LDV network in New Zealand. He's got a broad range of B2B and B2C sales and client management experience across various industries, including digital and technology, property and government. That could be handy for him, because those LDV commercials, particularly electric ones, I suspect are probably not going too badly in government circles at the moment. I've got literally a LDV electric van sitting about 5 feet that way. Inchcape New Zealand Managing Director Wal Dumper says he's delighted to welcome Penny and Jeff to Inchcape, especially at this exciting time for the company as we continue to deliver on Inchcape's ambition as part of the Accelerate strategy to expand our global footprint and to be the undisputed number one distributor of choice. Interesting ones there. Be interesting to see what they do with those brands. Be interesting to see if Penny's actually distributing a different brand soon, because there's a lot of talk about SsangYong becoming, I think it's KG Mobility, since they went bust for like the 15th time and went into new ownership. But I think both those brands have some pretty reasonable products floating around, and certainly they're fairly down the track of electrification, which is good. Another nice little one, though, makes me intrigued to see that it's taken so long to happen. Continental Cars Volkswagen celebrates unique staff milestone. Continental Cars Volkswagen dealership in Newmarket, Auckland, is celebrating a unique staff milestone for sales consultants Rakcha Bula and Amber Gorry. It says Bula and Gorry have just achieved their Volkswagen sales certification, becoming the first females in New Zealand to achieve this milestone. I don't know if that's good or bad.
Nah, I was so surprised reading that.
According to the dealership, Bula and Gorry have joined a select group of only 20 such qualified salespeople nationwide. That makes it slightly better, but surprising.
When Natasha McAllister decided to start Women in Automotive, this is one of the reasons why. They are so underrepresented in a number of areas. This is two-edged sword promoting that one. The good side is, well, only 20 people have it, so they're adding to a small elite list. But the shame of it is that only 20 people in New Zealand have it, and that's really quite sad.
Yes. What was it I was saying at the start of this about about MTA wanting to talk about immigration before qualifications? Just saying. Not blaming Continental Car Services there either. That's very good that you've got those staff qualified in that way, and excellent to see you putting that out there as far as I'm concerned.
And good on them for getting more women through at that higher level of education and certification. Let's see more of it.
Yeah, and they'll sell some cars, because we all know how important women are in the sales process, both from the buying and the selling side. In the finance industry, I feel like it's almost women dominate the sales side of the finance industry. Amos, is that a fair call?
Yeah, 100%. I feel like I've seen a lot, and women are better communicators than men. So this is it's just absolute. That's why I was referring to it being a surprise. I think it's good. Totally.
They need to learn what the finance industry learned a long time ago. In other words, CardLink launches first card covering fuel and EVs, and this is important if you have a lot of EVs, I guess, around in a lot of cars. You've got to fuel up. New Zealand's first multi-brand fleet card covering both traditional fuel and EV vehicles has been launched by payments company CardLink. CardSmart Plus Electric allows businesses to pay for everything vehicle-related on one card, whatever the makeup of their fleets, with CardLink part of business payments global firm FleetCor. We had the first iteration of this card, which was a normal card and then a tag, and now they have that all merged into one card. And you still gotta have the companion fob, so it's still there, but it all goes on the one bill, so super handy if you've got staff out there that do have to charge or fuel cars at the same time. Certainly a product to look at. On the sort of charging side as well, Z Energy acknowledges a statement of claims. So Consumer NZ, the Environmental Law Initiative, and Lawyers for Climate Action New Zealand are seeking declarations from the High Court that Z Energy has breached the Fair Trading Act by allegedly misleading New Zealanders with its public messaging. Consumer New Zealand Chief Executive John Duffy says he believes Z Energy is involved in greenwashing. We're concerned that Z Energy has made public claims which create the impression it is making bold changes to significantly reduce its emissions and is urgently mitigating its contribution to the climate crisis, when in reality, this is not the case at all, Duffy says and claims and alleges. I'm going to throw like 18 alleges in there. I don't want to be part of some court case. Z Energy spokesperson Kerry Shannon says the company has acknowledged the statement of claims served on it by consumer and all those parties. We take the claim made against Z extremely seriously and are now working to consider our response. They alleged through various advertising campaigns and public statements, Z has created the impression it is taking urgent action to counter the climate crisis. Claims include that Z is reducing its carbon emissions, is getting out of the petrol business, has built a biofuel plant, and is rapidly expanding its electric vehicle EV charging network. I can attest to the last one. They are growing their charging network like no one else at the moment, and they're putting in some really cool, serious equipment, including some amazing Napier-developed and built 200 kilowatt EV chargers that can go up to 1 megawatt of charging. It's pretty darn cool tech to be developing in New Zealand as far as I'm concerned, red-face charging. Duffy says he believes the claims made by Z Energy don't stack up. Z Energy's total monthly emissions have increased this year. Sales of fossil fuels are increasing as its share of the fuel market. Z Energy's biofuel plant stopped operating in 2020 and shut down completely in 2022. EV chargers have only been installed in a small percentage of Z's outlets, and its former chief executive publicly said fast chargers on forecourts are not a long-term transition option for Z Energy. The group believe that Z Energy is capitalising on New Zealand's concerns about the climate crisis for commercial gain. From what we can see publicly, there is nothing particularly bold or urgent about Z Energy's approach to getting out of the petrol business, raising concerns that its actions are at odds with its stated intent. Now,
well, I'm going to make some popcorn, sit at the side, and watch how this one goes.
Yeah, there's some interesting stuff they have caught them out on there. If they're still marketing the biofuel plant, that's naughty.
It is.
If talking about their emissions and the share, they have, as a group, bearing in mind Z was acquired, but it also acquired other companies at the same time. So I believe they acquired Castrol and Caltex and Challenge. So yes, their emissions would be up because they basically bought a whole big chunk of the market. I guess the argument goes that, well, it's up. Is Z doing a better job with that market share at reducing the carbon than its previous owner was? And if they are, then that could be argued that rise is somewhat negated. They are rolling out chargers at a great rate. They are doing very expensive installs. They are not half-assing it. Like, for example, and I don't want to be mean to BP here, BP is also putting out a significant number of chargers, but what BP are doing is maybe one 75 kilowatt unit at each station or significant station, and maybe two at a big one, calling it a day. If we take Wairau, for example, Wairau has, what are we at? 5 chargers, 5 high output chargers at one station. And they're doing that at multiple stations. Even at the closest Z station to me here in Warkworth, you can charge 4 cars at 180 kilowatts. So while they may say that's only a small percentage of the stations that are there so far, I think 2 or 3 have been opened up in the last week or two alone. And they are serious investment stations. That Wairau project, I imagine, would be worth multiples of millions.
You raised some really good points there, and this is why I said I'd make a bowl of popcorn and sit on the side and watch this, because this will be a bit of a ding-dong fight. And you're right, they have acquired companies, and so what is the relative share of those components versus the absolute increase? I also know that Z Energy views themselves as an energy company, not as a fossil fuel retailer. So more so than some of the others. And I think they had been planning, I know from previous years' discussions with them, they've been sitting on the sidelines looking at what's the critical mass for EVs, when is it going to make commercial sense for us to get in and start making some of those conversions. And they're now getting into it. And I wouldn't be surprised that come 2025, there'll be some, this will be a different story. So this is going to be quite an interesting claim and counterclaim to watch.
Interestingly, they are in the home energy space now as well. And an independent survey by, I think, Money Hub came out last week showing that they were by far the cheapest energy company to be with if you have an electric vehicle. So they beat out, I believe, Genesis for that title. So yeah, it's a tricky one. I guess what these guys have done is taken the sum of all things over a number of years, and I guess it makes great headlines now. But we'll see what happens by the time it goes to court. And I wonder if Z will just put the pedal down just a little bit harder on their EV structure to see if they can't wring a few more units out there before this goes to court. So look, that is all the news we have for this week. You guys up to much over the next one before we potentially see you next time?
Working?
Yeah, I've got a full-scale construction going out at the back of my house.
Now, as we mentioned last week, we've got our lunch next Friday. We still haven't drawn a seat for that for a listener who wants to come along. So, as I said, just go and throw us an email to Richard at EVs and Beyond. Richard at automediagroup.co.nz, and I'll pick one out of the hat. I think we put a question out there last time, but I'm not gonna do that. Well, okay. If you're listening now, what's the rate of the Z charges at Wairau? Chuck that in there just to prove you've been listening. yeah, I'll pull someone out of the hat. I said we won't announce it because these are private lunches, and someone come along and have a seat. I don't think you're able to come, Amos. I think you're off somewhere overseas at a time.
And Aussie, yeah.
Oh, bugger. Oh, well. Yeah. Oh, well. The new restaurant looks pretty good too. So.
Yeah. Totally.
Enjoy, Richard. Enjoy.
Yes, it's on my birthday too. But we'll broadcast that morning. We'll do a show. I'm not sure from where, but we will do a show that day before we run off to lunch. So yeah, everyone, thanks for joining us. Thanks, Graham McDonald, who's somewhere probably in an Uber on the way to his beloved Air New Zealand lounge at the moment. Thanks, David Crawford and your dogs, and thanks, Amos Banbury, down there in Christchurch. We'll catch you around later.
Cheers.